Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the 2020 podcast, Canada's #1 optometry podcast. I am your host, Dr. Harbir Sayan. Thank you so much, as always, guys, for taking the time to join me here to learn and to grow. I'm always so grateful for all the support. As always, I'm going to ask a big favor right off the top, and that is if you get some value from this, please share it. Put a screenshot up on Instagram, or send a link to a friend. Put a link on Instagram or LinkedIn, wherever you live, wherever you spend your time. Facebook. I never go on Facebook anymore, but put it on Facebook too. All right, and tag us and let our friends and colleagues know that we're having these conversations. As always, I'm trying to bring on guests and have conversations that are going to help us all grow and for our profession to grow and to be better and stronger in the future. And my man, Dr. Henry Reis, is definitely the perfect person to have these conversations with. Dr. Reis is the owner of Integra Eyecare, which is a 2-location, multi-doctor, 8-doctor practice in Vancouver and Burnaby. He is an entrepreneur, a true entrepreneur at heart. He is a founder of a tech startup, which we're going to talk about, AI for Eyes. He's originally trained as an ophthalmologist in Brazil and is now, of course, practicing as an optometrist here in Canada. He was named the BCDO Optometrist OD of the Year just this year at the BCDO conference, and also previously named one of RBC's top 25 Canadian Immigrants of the Year. Those are just a few of the many accolades this man has acquired and achieved in his long, illustrious career. Dr. Reis, thank you for being here. I really appreciate it, man.
Hey, thanks for having me on.
Hey, listen, I want to say this so we get it out of the way. Dr. Reis is coming a little bit out of his comfort zone here, and I want to say a big thank you for doing that, Henry. You are truly an influential, impactful person in our profession, and people need to hear your thoughts and hear your voice. So I appreciate you coming out of your shell a little bit to do this for us. And I think this is definitely going to be one of our more listened to episodes this year because of the amount of value that you're going to share. So just in case you weren't sure this one is an important one to listen to, just in case you thought you're only going to take the first few minutes in, you're going to definitely want to stay tuned for the whole episode. All right, Henry, I know I gave a little bit of a quick preview of who you are. Tell me a little bit more about yourself. How would you introduce yourself to somebody new that you're just meeting?
Okay, so I'm Henry. My actual name is Henrik, but it's so hard for people to pronounce, even though there's Henrik Sedin here in BC, right?
That's easy.
So Henry, from Brazil, trained ophthalmologist in one of the most prestigious universities there. And I moved to Canada and bridged over to become an optometrist here, having practicing since 2013.
Amazing. What you've accomplished in that 12-year period is incredible. Again, with the practices, with the level that you practice at. I just took a little tour around. By the way, we're at Integra Eyecare. We're at the newer location here in Vancouver. Beautiful, absolutely beautiful office. Took a walk through. Henry showed me around the tech that this guy has in the practice and the way he runs it. The culture that he's developed is incredible. So those are the types of things that we're going to talk about. Let's talk a little bit. I think the overarching kind of theme here, which we talked about just the other day, is reinventing yourself. And I think we're jumping into a pretty heavy topic here, but talking about reinventing yourself and the importance of reinventing yourself as you go through your life and through your career. Tell me about why that's been important to you.
Well, I feel like every immigrant has to some degree, reinvent themselves, right? In my case, I come from a country that doesn't speak English. So I had to learn how to speak a new language, how to drive in a new country, and bridging onto a career that's very similar to the one I had back home, but just so many differences that are fundamental to the profession.
Sure.
For example, we didn't have any connections to sales back home. There's no optometry in Brazil. So it's ophthalmology and opticians.
Yeah, right.
There's no optometrist in the middle. I had to reinvent myself to be able to start over. And when it comes to reinventing yourself, I feel like most people are afraid of change in general. I feel like that's one of those fundamental fears that everyone has when you go from one step in your career to the next, when you go from single to married, when you go from, changing cities, everything starts over, right? So in my case, I had to reinvent myself as a way to survive, but it opened up a bunch of doors to opportunities that I would never have otherwise.
Yeah.
So I would say, once you overcome the fear of reinventing yourself, that's when good things happen.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess in that sense, as an immigrant, you were forced to, and any other immigrant that has gone through that type of experience, you are absolutely forced to reinvent yourself. I find that many others, though, don't have to go through such a huge life shift, but still reinventing themselves is very important. How would you encourage somebody? I imagine, like you said, there is understandably a lot of fear around in reinventing yourself. Like I can think to myself, I feel pretty good about where I am right now. Why would I want to make a big shift? Why would I want to change myself? What would you say to somebody who kind of brings that kind of counter argument to what you're saying?
The biggest concern people have about change is ending up in a worse position.
Sure.
I feel like that's the thing. No one's afraid of change. Everyone's afraid of losing what they have.
Right.
Once you understand that, then you can shift the mindset into, well, I'm losing something in exchange for something potentially greater. So in this industry, if you don't reinvent yourself on a regular basis, you're falling behind.
Right.
I've been here for a little bit over a decade, and I've seen the introduction of big players in the industry that were not here when I started.
Right.
I saw the growth of online and retail. I've seen shifts in AI. I've seen shifts in virtual frame fitting and so many other things. So if you're not concerned about those, if you're not wired and paying attention to those changes, before you know it, you are obsolete.
Totally.
So change in this case, it is a way to stay relevant, to staying focused on what you do, and more importantly, on how to better serve your patients. So
Absolutely.
you have to embrace change.
What's going to ultimately negatively affect us as professionals, as people, and as our profession as a whole is complacency is what's going to kill it. So kill our growth. So we have to make sure that we're willing to push forward and change over time. Absolutely. I love that you put it that way, because as we can see, our world is changing around us, right? So you have reinvented yourself multiple times since you've been here. Obviously, just the simple transition of coming to Canada and having to become a Canadian in many ways. But in your profession, one of the things that you have done is not just to be an optometrist, not just to be a business owner, but to be the founder of a startup. And I really wanted to talk about this. We'll come back to the optometry side of things and how you run your office and all this kind of stuff. But one of the key things I really want to talk to you about is entrepreneurship. That's one of my favorite conversations on the podcast. In fact, when I started the podcast, I'm not even going to remember it now. It used to be the 2020 podcast, and the subtitle was, entrepreneurship, business, and something. And so the entrepreneurship was part of the title because I loved having that conversation so much. So I want to hear about your story of starting a tech company and inventing essentially a new product, and that was based in AI. So tell us a little bit about AI for Eyes and how it started.
Okay, so it started in 2018.
Okay.
A lot of people don't know that. When they research AI for Eyes, they think it's a new company.
Right.
Because our whole understanding of AI is probably from a few years ago when we had OpenAI start ChatGPT. That's when AI really hit the mainstream media and people started talking about it.
Right.
But in our case, I was giving a talk in Vienna at the European Society of Refractive Surgeons.
Wow.
And it was about a simplified version of DEUS 2. So I created a flow chart that helped doctors that are running busy practices to diagnose and treat dry eyes in a more effective way. And part of my talk was complaining about the fact that we tend to not follow certain algorithms. We fall into old habits. And if you're running behind, you won't really measure osmolarity on patients. You won't measure their symptoms using a speed questionnaire, for example. It's so easy to be complacent, right? So part of the talk was about that. And then my business partner at the time, he said, we should start a company together to create a solution that allows doctors who think that way to deliver a greater standard of care, to elevate the standard of care. So the idea was, let's create a artificial intelligence powered device that helps scan pretty much every single part of the eye that you need to scan to come up with a consistent, repeatable, and fast diagnosis for dry eyes. As we know, it's a pretty complex condition to diagnose properly. So the idea was bold. At the time, I thought, wow, that seems daunting because, we're starting a hardware/software company from scratch.
Right.
And mind you, in 2018, I had been here for 7 years. I was still learning how to navigate the industry. I was working as a key opinion leader for a few companies, and I was a new father. I had just, So my son was 1 at the time, and there was a lot of change in my life. So I decided to navigate that and went head first. And that was probably one of the most difficult parts of my journey in Canada. From starting a company with a new business partner who helped fund the company from, 2022 onwards. But from its inception to 2022, I reached out to a variety of leaders in the industry. We raised $1.2 million in revenue. We grew from idea to an alpha device that the proof of concept was there. The hardware is the best I've ever seen. The algorithm works. and the system works. So it's now in its last stage of development where we have a new CEO who's bringing this device to market. That was the whole idea. But the whole envisioning a device and then selling the idea to people when there was nothing to show, that was incredibly challenging for me. I feel I'm completely outside of my comfort zone here talking on camera. This is completely outside of my comfort zone.
Yeah.
I don't mind speaking in public and in front of a live audience, but put a camera on my face and I shut down. So,
well, once again, thank you for being open to it. It is interesting. And listen, not judging at all. And I know everybody's psychology is totally different in these types of capacities, but you are able to speak in front of large audiences and very comfortably. And so I knew once I put the camera on, once we started getting going, it was going to be a lot of value that comes from you to share with everybody. That's incredible. So I've heard a little bit about this type of thing where the founder's journey is actually maybe not what we see so much in public. Like the fact that a lot of your time was spent like convincing people to invest and to raise the capital to actually bring this thing to fruition. Your idea is great, the product is great, but it's that other stuff that happens behind the scenes that's actually a lot of work. So how far along has that all come now? And where is that company at this stage?
So when I started, I had a very clear view of what I wanted to achieve, what the device would look like, and what the the output would be. So we retained a company called Starfish Medical. They're one of the leading medical device manufacturers in the world, and world-class team, phenomenal medical engineers. And they were able to bring that idea to fruition after we had a seed round. And when we got that capital in our hands and we were developing the device, it was incredibly challenging to understand what was worth exploring, what was worth investing in. How do you direct your resources?
Right.
So in our case, being a startup, I worked long weekends, pretty much every evening, pulled a bunch of all-nighters, and devoted, a good portion of my time, pretty much all of my free time onto this, all the blood, sweat, and tears that people talk about. So it was interesting. Every time I spoke to a doctor or a potential investor about the company, they thought, whoa, that must be incredibly glamorous that, you're a CEO of a company.
Yeah.
The reality is I wasn't a CEO in the essence of the word. I was a founder that was working my butt off to make sure that every dollar that we put in the company was put towards the end goal. So all the marketing was done by me. The website was created by me, the logo and everything else. So stuff that we as entrepreneurs normally do, and we take it for granted. But people that are seeing that from outside, they think, oh, you're lucky. I've heard that so many times. Oh, aren't you lucky that you had this opportunity to start a company? And they don't really realize how much time and money and effort was put into that, and the sacrifices that my family had to make, my wife, my son, and they, countless nights where my son would wake up in the middle of the night and would ask, "Where's Daddy? Where's Daddy?" Oh, Daddy's downstairs in the office working, and it's 3 a.m.
Yeah.
So now the company has a working prototype, a working alpha unit, not even a prototype anymore. It's on its
So that's the next step after having a prototype. Now you have an actual working unit. That's like the final product, essentially.
With a user interface that works and it looks sleek and it's beautiful. The device itself had so many iterations as we were creating it. It's far from what I had envisioned when we started, like every other device that's ever been invented.
Right.
And the whole idea was I wanted to switch from a consumer to the position of a creator. You go to a conference and you go to the booths and you see what's available, what's for sale, and you realize, I need to purchase that device. I want to acquire that line of glasses, and I want to offer those eye drops as a consumer. And I thought, what a great opportunity to leave that position and actually create something that resolves all of those pain points that we have in the real world. Right. So that was quite the interesting thing that kept me going. Right. Now that we have the device with an interface that works, the hardware works, we got to a point where we needed someone who understands SaaS, that understands software.
Right.
And we onboarded a new CEO, and she's phenomenal. And she is the one now running the company that's going to take that device, my brainchild, it's going to bring it to the market. So that's the last stage. It's the regulatory, and after regulatory approval, the go-to-market is pretty straightforward.
Gotcha. That's incredible. I appreciate you giving us kind of pulling back the curtain a little bit in there and giving us that behind the scenes, because I think most people would say it seems like a glamorous thing to be the founder, the CEO, because we see the Bill Gates and the Zuckerbergs of the world, and that's what we always envision when we hear CEO. But majority, 99.999% of CEOs, well, even those guys did have to hustle and work in the background until they became those personalities and those idols, and so to speak, that we see them as. So I appreciate you kind of pulling that back and helping everybody understand how much work actually goes into it. And it's not something that you can just do, willy-nilly just to become a founder and CEO of something, especially something so complex as this. Again, as you said, bringing multiple worlds together, right? Healthcare and AI, hardware and software. Not a lot of brains can compute all of those things at the same time. And I certainly understand the becoming not just the chief executive, but the chief operating and the chief marketing and the chief of logistics and the chief of who knows what else has to go into it. So really cool. And I look forward to hearing more about this technology as it comes out. And is there somewhere people can go to learn more about this right now? Is there an active website, or if somebody wants to kind of watch out for this as it comes onto the market?
It is available on LinkedIn. It's a pretty active page now. And AIforEyes.com is the...
AI number 4 eyes.
Yes, AIforEyes.com.
Like it's not FOR, it's the number 4.
No, it's FOR.
Oh, it is FOR. Okay, my mistake.
Yeah, so the logo is with the number 4.
Oh, okay.
But the website is AI4 FOR.
Got it.
Eyes,
okay, AIFOREyes.com. Okay, that's amazing. Again, I absolutely love the conversation around entrepreneurship, especially outside of the practice, right? I see somebody like yourself. I see somebody like Claudine Curry with Eye Drop Shop and stuff like that, where somebody's building something entirely separate from. I don't want to say that the path is laid out when we open a practice, but we know that there's many other colleagues around us that have done this type of thing as far as starting an optometry clinic and going through the process there. And we're going to talk about how some practices are different, for example, yours. But when we go completely outside of these 4 walls and we have to create, as you said, something from scratch, something that's never been created before, I think that's just magical to hear and wonderful to see it come to fruition and I'm excited to see that. So let's talk about within these 4 walls, Integra. Now, we've grown into this big booming practice, and we're talking about how your Burnaby practice, you're kind of bursting at the seams, waiting for a new space to continue to grow that practice. Where did it start? And then this is a big, long question now, or big, long answer, I imagine, to this question. Where did it start, and how can you name 2 or 3 things that you think you've done well to bring it to this point now, to build the team that you have and the number of patients that you have?
Okay, so Integra for me is a continuation of the practice I had back in Brazil.
Okay.
So back home, we had a ophthalmology practice inside of a multi-centric hospital. So we had one location where I ran the ophthalmology clinic, and there was 11 other locations where I would either just practice at another ophthalmology location, but they had ENTs and cardiologists and so on and so forth. So when I moved here, I realized that there was some fragmentation, right? You see an ophthalmologist for glaucoma, and they don't really practice alongside someone that does cornea. And there's no retinal specialists in the same space, with the exception of the Eyecare Center. All of those practices, they are of subspecialties, right? So I thought, well, this is not very efficient for the patient, for the government, and for anyone for that matter. And I believe in collaboration over competition. That was always my number 1 motto. I feel like there is more competition than collaboration here, and it should shift. It must shift if we are increasing our scope, and if we are improving collaboration with ophthalmology. I believe this is something that needs to happen.
Right.
So my idea with Integra is when I bought the Burnaby office, it was running since 2006. So that was 2014 when I started. And it was a dying practice. We had about 2,000 patients at the time. About a third of them were active files. And we were upside down. If you looked at our books, it would call me crazy for buying the practice because it was just not a good idea at all. And that was an opportunity. It already had a location, it had patients, and it didn't have the technology, didn't have the frame lines I wanted, didn't have the lenses I believed in. But I thought, okay, it's better than starting up cold.
Yeah.
So bought the practice, and within the first year, we renovated the entire space and made the front desk a lot smaller and the reception a lot smaller and increased the pretest room and doubled from 1 exam lane to 2, even though it was just me practicing at the time, because my vision was, well, I'll have more doctors coming in and I want them to be doing something that I'm not comfortable with. be it binocular vision, pediatrics,
right.
vision therapy, what have you. I didn't want to be Dr. Reis's office. I wanted to be something where multiple practitioners could work in an integrated way, hence the name. So we grew very rapidly because doctors and patients, they saw what we were trying to achieve. They saw they would come in and it's a one-stop shop, right? Ideally, that was the goal, grow that practice all the way to not having any room for more patients. Right now, I think I'm booking 8 or 9 months ahead, which is
Wow.
insane.
Wow.
Yeah, and our associates are incredibly busy at the Burnaby office and we need to grow. And the whole idea now is we're waiting for real estate that is right next door to be developed so we can move to a bigger practice.
That's great.
And then this office appeared out of thin air. I was thinking we needed to build a second location. And I saw this development here. So we got the real estate and developed into a 3,000 square feet multi-doctor location that has ophthalmology working alongside optometry. And I wanted to challenge that whole concept of having an optometrist working in an ophthalmology office, which is great, but I wanted to have something where both work at the same level and collaborate at the highest level possible.
Right.
I didn't want to have an ophthalmologist visiting my practice once a month or once a week. I wanted them to have their location here as their primary location. And that's what we did. And now we have phenomenal doctors that are seeing patients here today outside of this room they call Integra home. And when they call their patients, it's not, I see patients in this location as well as Integra. So this is where they see their patients.
Right.
And I want to grow to more subspecialties. Now we have general, we have glaucoma. And if it's up to me, we'd have retina, oculoplastics, cornea, cataracts, everything.
Everybody.
Under one roof. So I feel like that's the biggest differentiator of what we have here. I want to have a very strong dry eye practice because I come from a corneal background.
Mm-hmm.
I want to have a very strong myopia management practice because I'm a high myope and my son is myopic as well.
Yeah.
So selfishly, it's a topic that really interests me.
Sure. There's good things that come out of being selfish. It doesn't, altruistic, it's nice to be altruistic and selfless, but sometimes when you're doing something for yourself or at least for the betterment of somebody's health, other good things come out of it. And that's of course the service that you provide to your myopic patients. There's interesting things in there. Really the ophthalmology thing is really, really a cool idea. Dr. Rob Scherzer is here, which some people might know from social media because he does have a little bit of a social media. And he's got his own podcast too, I think, right?
He does, yes.
So that's kind of cool that he's working here within your practice. Tell me a little bit about, I want to talk about scope modernization as well a little bit because, you brought that up in there. But tell me a bit about if you could distill it. I know it's hard, especially over a decade of doing this. What are 2 or 3 things that you think you've done well in there, that you've done consistently in there, that you think has really helped to grow your practice? One
of them is to not be complacent. I think that's the number one thing. I realized that there's no going back to Brazil. I've burned that bridge.
Mm-hmm.
The boats.
Burn the boats.
Burn the boats. And there's no going back. Not that I can't. But I realized, no, I'm moving to a new country. I got to make this work. And when I bought the practice and I realized that the numbers were looking the way they were, I realized, I got to make this work. So not staying complacent was the number one thing. I would come to the office, and if I'm not fully booked, I would pick up the phone and I would call GP practices and I would say, hey, I'm a new doctor in the area and this is my background. This is what I do. Can I come and have a word with you? And I heard probably 99 no's to 1 yes.
Okay.
But that 1 yes would open more doors. And if you ask my optician who was with the practice and still is with the practice when I bought the practice, he was there already.
No way.
So he's been with Integra longer than I have.
That's amazing.
He remembers. We would just have one phone for the entire office and one computer for the whole office.
That's amazing.
It was paper files.
Yeah, right.
And I would just be running back and forth trying to get a hold of doctors and, make the practice known. So if we talk about it these days now with social media and, with all the new vehicles that we have to communicate what we do.
Yeah.
Google reviews, for example, that's how long ago it was. I remember discussing that with doctors when I first bought the practice, saying, I believe reviews are going to be the number one drivers to your practices. And people would say, no, I don't think so. It's the website.
Yeah.
And I thought, no, that's the reviews because it's organic. It's coming from patients. It's sharing that experience. You know how when you want to get a new barber, you'll ask a buddy, who cut your hair?
Totally.
And then nowadays, no one asks a buddy anymore. Everyone goes on Google reviews.
Right.
That was a big driver, right? So I believe that was one thing, making sure patients get the experience that is not just what they expected, but beyond. That's another one.
Yeah.
On all of my talks throughout the years, I always say that I feel like optometry used to be very transactional, like a vending machine, if you may. You want to buy a Coke, you put a toonie, you get a Coke, and there you go.
That's $2 for our American listeners. A toonie is $2.
For Americans, yeah. So, you get your money in there, you get your Coke, you got exactly what you wanted.
Yeah.
And then you go on. And if you ever feel thirsty and you need another Coke, you don't go to the same vending machine, you go to a vending machine.
Right.
So optometry as a career, you would be like, well, I'm delivering the center of care that is required. But if you don't go beyond, then you're just one vending machine next to another.
Totally. Yeah.
And there's so many optometry practices, right? So the number one thing would be for me to go way beyond what the patients expect. And it could be as easy as having popcorn sometimes for a patient. I have a patient who is obsessed with Pearl Jam.
Okay.
And the first day I saw the guy, I asked, a nice t-shirt. I like Pearl Jam too. And he goes, oh, yeah, that's a cool band, blah, blah, blah. I remember that. I cannot put that on the patient's file, but memorized. So the following year he comes in, there's Pearl Jam playing for him in the reception.
That's awesome.
And he goes, oh, good taste in music. And every single time he sets foot in the office now, there's Pearl Jam waiting for him in the exam room.
That's awesome.
Those things, right? Just going beyond.
That is really going beyond. But that's actually, I love the first one. The complacency, as we said earlier, is really kind of the killer of dreams, if you will. It's kind of what I was getting to earlier. But the going above and beyond is really key. So when I speak to really successful entrepreneurs in general, or business owners in general, it's that going beyond is a really common theme. And it reminds me actually of something my dad used to tell me. My parents have been business owners for a long time, and they used to own, when we first moved to Canada, speaking of the immigrant sort of mindset experience, when we first moved to Canada in the 90s, they bought a grocery store and a lot of produce and stuff like that. And they did very well. But a lot of it was when I used to ask my dad as I was growing up, what was it? People would drive in, it was on Fraser Street in Vancouver. People would drive in from Surrey and Coquitlam and Burnaby and stuff like that. And I was like, this is weird that you're driving 30 minutes. You could buy produce. There's other produce shops. But they'll come and they kind of make a trip of it to do other stuff. And they'll always come and see Dad. They'll ask for Rick. And I'd always ask him, like, what is it? He's like the service. He's like, when somebody crosses that threshold, it's your job to keep them there. You got to do whatever, to create that experience. And we're talking about selling produce, right? But still, he was doing that back then. And so I always remember that. And it always sticks with me when somebody like yourself says it as well. Going above and beyond in so many different ways. Dr. Adam Ramsey, in the States, he talks about that a lot too, whether it's the aroma of the scent in the clinic, whether it's playing music for a patient, remembering little things. Those are all really, really valuable. And I think in the moment, you might say, oh, that was just one little data point of, okay, a positive experience. But then you have another one and another one and another. And if the same patient has multiple of those data points, all of a sudden they're yours for life, right? They are now truly a Dr. Henry Reis or an Integra Eyecare devotee. And that's ultimately what we want to create is those, like, why are certain bands like Pearl Jam or U2, why do they have such rabid fans? It's not just because their music's good. It's about the way they make people feel. And we have to try to convert patients into like true fans and true believers. And that kind of stuff is amazing. So that's really cool that you have that.
And I think it goes beyond just making that a conscious decision. It has to come from a position that is authentic. For example, my team here, they joke that I have the weirdest memory ever because we have north of 50,000 patients now. Wow. And they walk in the door and I call them by their first name and ask about their dogs. And I remember their dogs' names. So they see it's authentic. I'm not just putting notes on their file and thinking, oh, if I do this, because I hear a lot of talks about customer service being so important and, building that relationship. When it comes from a position of authenticity, when you really care to connect with the patient, when you pick up the phone and call someone and say, hey, I just started you on a glaucoma medication and I just wanted to see if you're doing okay. You're not just doing that out of a place of compliance because you need a check. You're doing it out of a place of really caring about the patient. That really drives it home because they don't want to come back because you're good at dry eyes. In my case, for example, I have a lot of people coming in because they saw on a forum that we do a lot of advanced dry eye care. But they come in for that, and then they realize, oh, Henry is fun to talk to. And, I'm always making jokes and I keep it light, and they connect.
Yeah.
And before you know it, like you said, they're my patients for life. But because we deeply care about the patients,
absolutely. Optimization, modernization, advancement of scope. Give me just a few sentences on your thoughts there and why you think it's important.
I think it's crucial. When I moved here, I was 99% ophthalmologist and 1% optometrist. I had just started my career here as an OD, and I still had an issue with the scope being so limited because I wanted to remove skin tags and milia, and I wanted to perform chalazion surgery and, if possible, do an SLT, and that was not allowed. I wanted to prescribe orals to patients, and that was not allowed.
Which shockingly is still not allowed.
It's here incredibly frustrating.
Yeah.
And it's a disservice to the public because I understand that there is this whole conversation about controlling the scope because ophthalmologists are concerned about the standard of care changing. But that is not the case, because every single time scope has expanded and been modernized, it's been good for the public. You look at how glaucoma, after, we expanded glaucoma, I believe it was 2012. And there was a lot of resistance from the medical community about allowing ODs to treat glaucoma. And it's been nothing but amazing to patients. It's been nothing but amazing to surgeons, especially glaucoma surgeons, because now they can focus on those cases that demand their care, that need surgery, that need advanced therapy. And that's the minority of cases when you think about it. They don't really have the capacity to serve patients following the proper frequency of care.
Right.
So when it comes to orals, like we were discussing, and everything else, I believe there's always going to be resistance, and there's always arguments to be made about, the training was not there when they went to optometry school, so now they have to go back and retrain. Whereas if you come from a medical background, that's already there. But those are not reasons not to modernize, because this is not about optometry having a bigger piece of the pie. It's about the public having a bigger piece of the healthcare system.
Better access, right?
Better access. And that's just the reality of things. And I don't think it's something that can be stopped by anyone. When you look at legislation and all these changes that need to be made for you to expand scope, they can slow down the movement, they can slow down expansion, but they can't really stop it because ultimately it's about the patient.
Yeah.
It's not about us.
Yeah, absolutely. I think a little bit of opposition is a good thing. Don't get me wrong. It doesn't make sense for us to just have a landslide of just do whatever we want. I think some opposition and some regulation and some, making sure that the appropriate things are designated to the appropriate professions. For example, major, more invasive surgical procedures. Totally understandable. But ultimately, it's for the betterment of our communities, our society, our patients, allowing certain communities to have access, in particular, to care that they don't have access to, reducing wait time, saving the government money. This is the other thing, is like how much redundancy there is that causes so much additional cost. It doesn't really make a lot of sense. But anyways, I wanted to keep that one short just because that wasn't really on our list of questions, but I knew you were the right guy to ask, given your background as well, and given your integration here with ophthalmology in your own practice. It's nice to hear from your perspective.
And I've heard from colleagues in the medical community several times. They will open up, as they'll perceive me as someone that sees both worlds. As if I go back to Brazil, I still practice as a surgeon. So I can actually understand, is this a risky move? Is this something that we should be concerned about and afraid of? And the reality is, as an ophthalmologist, I would be 100% for scope expansion if I were practicing here as a surgeon. I would be 100% for it. And that's my spiel when I talk to them. I explain the reasons why, and I believe it's safe and it's the right move. And when I talk to my colleagues in optometry, I explain the same reasons, because being in both worlds allows me to see that there's literally nothing to fear. If regulations are there, if you have ways to make sure the training is done properly and that the standard of care is met, what's not to love?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I love that. And funny enough, yes, of course, there are some of our own colleagues that need a bit of convincing as well. So it's helpful when we have a voice like yours to help. help everybody understand. One thing I wanted to touch on before we wrap up here is you have, as we touched on here, your practice is continuing to grow, and you have a lot of ODs that work with you here. Some are quite young and new, fresh grads. I met Paula today, who is a brand new grad. Shout out to Paula, who is a rising star here at Integra. I want to just give a shout out to our young ODs, our new grads, or maybe even students that are listening. What advice do you have from your perspective in a practice like this? Somebody who works with a lot of new grads, what do you suggest or advice you give to somebody in that position usually?
Okay, I think the number one, probably the only advice I'd have for now is don't be passive. Be the one who builds your own reality. That's the one advice I would have. Because if you start a practice, even if you are in corporate where, they wrap it all and package it and give it to you and say you practice this way, there's still ways within that practice that you can make it your own. They can connect with the patient base, that you can actually go out of your way and create a stronger patient base. So don't wait for the practice owner or home office, head office, to provide you with the patients, provide you with the tools. Think of what you need to thrive, to succeed. Look at your patient base and grow it yourself, because ultimately that's what's going to happen.
Yeah.
If you are an associate in an independent practice, trust me, the owner wants you to be a partner. They might not say it, but they want you to be a partner. They want you to treat it as your own,
right,
because
absolutely.
At some point it will be. And if you work for corporate, they do want that too. The reality is if you don't take ownership, if you take a passive seat and just expect things to happen, you don't grow as a professional. And that is the one thing that I see separating the doctors who become superstars and the ones who stay complacent. That's the gap. It's the ones that actually get stuff done and they don't wait for things to happen to them.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I was telling you a story about a new associate at one of our offices, and she certainly fits that mold of that, conscientious, go-getter, ask a lot of questions, which I always encourage. I get a lot of text messages. What do you think about this patient? How should I approach this? I love that. I absolutely love that. Taking the initiative to do those things and, testing the waters, being comfortable to, if you've never done ortho-K before, to try that. Or if you've never fit a scleral before, let's try that. You don't get the experience unless you do it. And once you get the taste of that, how fulfilling it is to do those things, I think it helps you as the individual and the practice, of course, as a whole as well. So I love that advice. Before we go into the last couple of questions, I'm going to ask you, where can people learn more about you, Dr. Reis, or learn more about Integra Eyecare? Where would you like to send them to learn more?
I would say our website is brand new now. It's integraeyecare.com. So integraeyecare.com.
Perfect.
And yeah, our bios are there. We're trying to make them more than just the achievements and the education. I'd like the bios to talk a little bit more about our passions outside of optometry.
Yeah, good.
So
good.
Yeah, it's all there.
integraeyecare.com. Awesome. Now, I always have ended the podcast with one or two questions that I haven't prepped you for. And I go back and forth. And you know what? Recently, I want to give a shout out to somebody, Cami Graywall, one of our listeners who reaches out to me from time to time to give me some input on the podcast and that kind of thing. And I want to say, Cami, thanks for the recent feedback. She said to me that she liked the old questions I used to ask a little more than the recent question that I added to the end of the podcast. So for you, Cami, on this one, I'm going to go back to the old questions, which, listen, I got a lot of good feedback on these ones too. I was trying a new question. I have been for the last little while, but I'm going to go back and give you the original two questions that I will ask at the end of every episode. All right. And I didn't prep you for them, but I want them just to be natural, authentic, whatever comes to mind. So the first question out of those two is, if we could step in a time machine and go back to a point in your life where you were having a difficult time, struggling with something. Now, you're welcome to, if you're open, to share what that moment was and what was happening. More importantly, though, I'd like for you to tell me, what advice would you give past Henry at that time?
So if I could go back to 2019, when I had, so my business partner at AI for Eyes is the CEO of a big industry player here in Canada. So I felt small. There was a big power imbalance. Right. So I was the one doctor with the one practice in Burnaby that was trying to make the practice work, working with this big CEO of a big company. And I was given the opportunity to be CEO of a startup, but that precluded me from actually running the show, of me saying, well, we actually need to spend money on this and that. I would defer a lot to that business partner. Right. So now I see my associates having the same mindset when they start over, when they start here and they say, well, I'm just getting started. I don't want to give you any feedback on how you run your clinic. And because you're Henry and I'm a new grad. And I say, no. If I put you in that position, that means that I trust that you're able to execute on it. And I'll empower you with all the tools to execute and deliver on what I expect you to deliver. I'm not expecting excellence. I'm expecting your full dedication, right? So if I could go back to 2019, I would tell past Henry, there is no such thing as a power imbalance. You got this. You don't have to grow into that position. You just, you've been trusted with that responsibility. Just get it done and don't feel small. So for you, Cami, and everyone else at home, if you're given a responsibility that feels too big to chew, just don't believe that you're not up to the challenge. Just make sure you believe in yourself and you get it done.
Love that. Love that advice. And that's a very tangible story and experience. I mean, I don't think many of us are going to be in that same position that you were in, where you're dealing with somebody from that level of experience in their world and trying to feel like you're at the same level. But that's really great advice, even in the practical setting, like here in the clinic. I think that's really wonderful. Thank you for that. So the second question, the final question, is all these things, and you certainly have achieved a lot of things in your career up until this point, but all of these things that you have achieved and all the accolades and business success to this point, how much of this would you say is due to hard work and how much is due to luck?
A lot more to do with luck than I like to admit. So as far as I know, I am one of 2 Portuguese-speaking doctors in BC.
No way. Okay.
There's a retinal specialist who's phenomenal, and there's myself. And in optometry, there's 1 doctor in Mississauga.
Really? That's you?
That's it.
Crazy. Okay.
So when I moved here, the community was very small, to the point where every time I learned about someone that was speaking Portuguese, we'd become best friends. You hear Portuguese on the street, you turn around, you go, oh my God, you're from Brazil, and then you connect. And then we had a boom. So if you look at the last 5 years, the Brazilian community, I think, is in the top 10 in immigrants here in BC. And it's amazing how much it's grown. So that was not planned, right? I moved here, I started providing services, and all of a sudden I had this tidal wave of Brazilian patients, and that helped boost our numbers and help us serve the community. So that was a great deal of luck. But I would still say it's 90% waking up at 4 a.m. and getting stuff done and not going to bed until midnight sometimes, and 10% luck. I like to say it's 99 to 1. It's 90 to 1.
Got it. I appreciate that. It's always interesting to hear guests work through that one, actually see the wheels turn, because I think a lot of people are like, 100% hard work, the initial, and then they say, wait, hang on a second. Oh yeah, there's this and there's this. There's always some amount of luck involved, and everybody's feeling of how much is involved is different. But that's amazing to hear. So thanks for answering those 2 questions that I did not prime you for. And thanks, Cami, for helping me switch gears again on this one. All right. Any final words of wisdom you want to share, Henry, before we wrap up?
I would say don't forget to like, share, subscribe. The 2020 podcast. It's an amazing host, and I'm so happy that I finally said yes to being part of the show.
Yeah, man, I appreciate that too. I know I've been hounding you for a little while, so I appreciate you making the effort and coming on. I think there's going to be so much great value in this one episode, and hopefully you'll be happy with the results. So we'll have you back on to talk about some more things in the future. Thank you for giving us the space here at Integra. Shout out to Integra, Eyecare, and the great team here. Be sure to check out the website. And in general, if you're looking for an example as ODs, you're looking for an example of somebody who's doing really great work in our industry, who's building a great practice, be sure to look at Henry and what he's built here.
I was going to say, I'm always open to welcoming other doctors to come to the practice to see what we do.
Yeah.
Every talk I've ever given, I say that, and I mean it. If you ever want to come by and then spend a day here, more than welcome to do so.
Excellent. So be sure to reach out. And of course, thank you to you all for listening and watching to the 2020 podcast, Canada's #1 optometry podcast. I'll see you guys in the next episode.